Welcome to Avoice for Creators. I'm your host, Daniel Norton. In this episode, I want to talk about synchronicity. I also have some emails and a call, and we'll talk about that. And also, if you have not been following my other platforms, I've recently started a Patreon. There's some questions about that. I'll talk about that at the very end. If you're interested in supporting the podcast in that way, stick around till the end. Otherwise, I'll let you know before I get into that if you want to just move on. So I have this little notebook I carry here. I carry different ones. And in it, I have written the word synchronicity because I was watching a video the other day, a YouTube video on painting miniatures, like for gaming, because I also do gaming. And they actually they didn't get to it. They were like, I'm not going to talk about it today, but something happened and I felt like it was synchronicity in a future video. And I didn't watch the future video because I got up and left and something happened. And it was one of those random things that pops up on YouTube. It wasn't somebody I subscribed to. So maybe I'll try to locate and find out what the synchronicity was. But I thought it was interesting because that word, first of all, it's such a cool word. You know, it's kind of like a coincidence, right? I mean, I'm not a philosopher or psychologist, but synchronicity is this kind of like this idea, this method of believing or connecting these coincidences and believing that there is some kind of cause there that we just don't see. That's my understanding of it. Obviously, call in or send me an email and let me know if I've got that wrong, but that's the general idea. So what the heck does this have to do with the arts is maybe what you're going to ask me. And everything. Because I think that oftentimes I often say, you make your own luck, right? This is a pretty common, and I didn't make that up, phrase, but what that means is that you're out there working and you've got different things going. You're planting many seeds. And when you do enough things, when you get yourself out there, you meet enough people, you plant enough seeds, you take enough pictures, that you do enough jobs, you learn enough, you interact. And again, enough, what does that even mean? But as you're spreading out there and doing more and more things, you're dropping all these roots and stuff. And then sometimes when we finally strike it, right, we get a job, somebody calls us, something works out, we get a bunch of views on a video or something happens, it seems like that came out of nowhere. And sometimes two things that seem completely unrelated form together to create this job or this opportunity for us. And that's the synchronicity. But the reality is that it is connected. If you start going further back and you look for these connections and ties, you will find that the work that you put on early, right? The seeds that you planted in the spring bloom in the fall, some of them, right? Sometimes it takes time and other things to trigger other things. So sometimes it might seem like we're just out there doing stuff and then all of a sudden out of nowhere, jobs come. And it is hard to know. It's hard to know exactly how and what to do, especially if you want to stand out. There are certain things where if you're aiming for like the middle, we'll say, and I don't mean this in an insulting way, but let's say you want to do something very basic. You have an idea that you love to shoot just simple stuff on white, commercial stuff. And you want to be doing that for different companies. So you can probably set on paper exactly how to do it, even to the point where once you've got your lighting set up, it never has to change, right? It's just very specific. You could teach it to people. It's a method. You could just do it. I've seen headshot photographers do this. They're like, this is how you do it. You mark it here. You spend money here. You put the lights exactly here. You tell this corny joke. And that basically works, right? To a certain level. But you won't be the person that does something really special or really different unless you break that. And if you break that mold, if you break that pattern, then success becomes more nebulous. It's a little bit harder to know exactly what you did at what moment that made that work. You could look at 100 pictures that you shot, and to you, they all have the same style. You put all the same effort into them. You worked really hard to create each image, but one of them blows up and everybody loves. Why? And if you create that same image again, would the same thing happen? And maybe even that part's a little bit unclear. So sometimes what seems like a coincidence is this buildup over time of things, and sometimes it just happens to be the right place at the right time. But in order to have the right place at the right time, you've got to be putting yourself out there. You can't just do nothing and hope that the stars will align or whatever you want to call it, and things will just start working. Synchronicity doesn't come to people who do nothing. Synchronicity is the result of, or coincidence is the result of you doing all this work up front that leads to these things that happen to fall together and then seem like, oh, wow, that's weird that suddenly happened and this person was there and that person knew who I was. And when I was at that party, they asked for me. And when I was at this thing, somebody recognized me. That's because of all the other things that you did before. So even though it may seem like these things are not related, they are. I'm not going to say there's never luck. I would never be one to say something like that. But what I will say is that luck comes from hard work. Luck comes from putting yourself out there. And if you feel like weird things just kind of come together to form what works for you, and you're like, I have no idea how this worked, you probably could track it back to something you had done before. Some place where you planted that seed, and maybe at the time you were thinking, oh, this could bring me this way, and nothing happened, so you just moved on and tried something else. But 3-4 years later, something was seen, somebody talked to somebody, that person over there did that, and then at the same time, something over here that you've been working on also kicks in, and when those things come together, that is our synchronicity, that is our coincidence. But is it really when we put in the work? I would love to hear from you on this. Anchor has changed the way they handle the call-ins, so you can't use the Anchor app, although I don't think many people here have been anyways. If you want to reach out to me, send me an email, avoice@dnphoto.com. That is going to be in the description. Also, join my Discord server. I will put a link to that in the description. Go in there, say yes to the rules and stuff. Click on the role of listener, and it will open up the area for the podcast, and you can become part of the conversation, maybe make some recommendations there, and that might be a better way to start interacting. So we're going to try to move this slightly that way if we can. If you want to record a voice message and attach that to an email, do that as well. I have one of those this week. I love to hear your voice on the show. So send me an email, send me a voicemail, reach out to me on Discord. Let's get your voice on the show. I would love to hear about times of synchronicity that have moved you forward in your art. One of the best ways you can support this podcast is to rate it, of course, 5 stars, and write a review. And of course, share it. But if you write a review, I will try to read a review every time that I can. And this week I have one from a lonely photographer via Apple Podcasts. It's 5 stars. You are not alone. Great podcast. Get me always back to my right way when I feel lost. I don't know anybody as a photographer in person from commercial background, so I feel lost sometimes, and this makes me feel very good, since you have the same issues or problems. And here it is, Mentor Daniel, someone with experience that doesn't make me feel lonely, with a smiley face. Hope it makes sense. I'm not great at English and deep thinking and ideas. I love them. Thanks, lonely photographer. Yes, that totally is clear. Right, you're not alone. And again, oftentimes when I get these reviews, I say the same thing. Exactly. This is what we're trying to create here. And I'm so glad when somebody calls in or writes a review and expresses this. This is what I'm looking to create here, a community. So, lonely photographer, join the Discord server, right? Jump in there. Now, I will also say my Discord server also houses my gaming group. So when you first jump in, you're going to see lots of people talking about gaming. You can just go right to the photo chat, unless you want to be involved in gaming. So don't be intimidated by that. Join in. We'll get a group going there, a conversation, and people can discuss what's going on. I think interacting with, discussing, commiserating, celebrating with other artists is the best way for us to grow and create luck and synchronicity. All right, like I said, somebody left me a voice message. Philip from Sydney, Australia. Let's hear what he has to say.
Hi Daniel, my name's Philip from Sydney, Australia. I just wanted to thank you for your podcast. I'm thoroughly enjoying it. The motivation for this message was the fact that you uncannily described the beginning of my photography career in your first couple of minutes. I started out exactly the same way. I've been a photographer since my dad gave me my first camera when I was a child. I love the nerdy aspect of it and I love the creative aspect of it. How lucky we are. Thanks again.
How lucky indeed. It is so great to find what you love. And it's great to find it when you're young. It's great to find it when you're older. When you find something that you finally connect with, no matter where you are in your life, it is such a great feeling. And I'm glad that I found photography, and seems Philip feels the same. And those of you who are out there that are photographers or other types of artists, I'm sure you feel the same as well. Thanks for calling in, Philip. We have an email from Mark. Mark, my most prolific emailer. Thanks, Mark. He has a lot of things to say. I'm going to target in on this right here. this idea of fashion and feeling. So we're talking a little bit about feeling in the past, and he says, fashion and feeling. Do fashion photographers aim for a look or a feeling or both? I'm asking because I'm really well placed to answer it. To expand by the look, you're given an assignment, show off a clothes accessory. You may or may not be art director. Some shots incredibly beautiful, but the models often look blank. Not always. I know another commercial photographer commented on this. Okay, so this is a really interesting question. And I think part of the problem is with these types of questions or these types of answers is that fashion photography is often looked at as one single thing, but there's a lot of aspects there. So if you're shooting something like a catalog, a fashion catalog, depending on the catalog, and it's literally just to show off the clothes, then the models tend to try to come into themselves and not take away from the product. That's part of the shot, right? You're trying to shoot the cloth. It's literally being shot on the model because it looks best that way, but you're basically making a product shot. If you're doing more like a lifestyle shot, then they should be emoting and feeling the way that the images that you're trying to create feel. So if it's if it's some kind of like LL Bean, catalog and the people are hiking or whatever, they should have that kind of vibe and they should be emoting. If it's LL Bean catalog and you're shooting the shirt in the studio against white to show the different colors, then they probably shouldn't be emoting too much. And that's where you get that. And I think part of and then of course you get editorial photography, which is a whole other thing. And then the emoting could be anywhere from blank stare because that's the right vibe to fully engaging with the camera to not looking at the camera at all, more of almost like a voyeur type look. And all of these things are acceptable. The thing is that fashion is not one thing. So I think that's one of the issues there. What happens is you get these commercial photographers, people that are not, and again, I don't mean this in like a putting them down way, but they're not fashion photographers by trade. They're just shooting fashion for that thing, or they want something that looks like fashion. So they often have the models make this blank stare because it's an easier way to separate what is effectively a portrait of a girl in nice clothes from a portrait by just having them have a dead stare. It's hard to have the model be emoting and stuff and have it still, smiling, whatever it might be, and still feel like a quote fashion picture because a lot of people don't understand fully fashion. Few people, I shouldn't say few, some people that say they want to get into fashion or want to shoot fashion and stuff want to shoot pretty girls in nice clothes, which, you could describe fashion as that. Obviously as men's fashion, but you know what I'm saying. Whereas a fashion photographer is somebody that is wanting to involve themselves in society in a way that fashion projects images and movements and social movements and all kinds of other things. It's a different kind of thing. And if you're looking more at the girls or the boys and less at like magazines and stuff to learn your trade, then you're probably more doing portraits, which is 100% fine. Don't get me wrong. In an ideal world, you will create an image that is a portrait of a fictional character that the model is playing, and that becomes the fashion image, in an editorial sense. I'm probably talking vagaries because fashion is full of vagaries, right? So that's that. So are you going, so the answer to the question, are you going for a look or a feeling or both? It kind of depends. The look might be just simply, again, for a catalog, then maybe just look. But ultimately, the looks should have a feeling. There's a reason why there is this like blank stare look. Like the blank stare look done correctly, and I think most people who look at fashion know what I'm talking about, it has meaning. It's not just, it's a pretty girl who isn't thinking of anything. It's a very specific idea of the way that they're looking. And if you can pull that off, it can be great. And if you don't, then, maybe less than great. I don't know. It really depends on what you're trying to do. So to answer the question, is it one or the other? I think that a lot of times people that don't do fashion are the ones that talk about it the most, because fashion photographers as far as the images and that kind of stuff, fashion photographers themselves talk about the fashion and less about the images, usually. But in any case, I digress there. What I'll say is that's a really great question. And if you're trying to break into fashion, I would really try to consider what the implications of somebody wearing that outfit are and why they might be doing the thing they're doing in that outfit. This is really the key to good editorial fashion. And it's actually much harder to do just like on a blank, you look at like the Vogue stuff where it's a lot of times just in a studio against a blank wall. That's hard to pull off and make it good. Usually it will just look like a pretty girl standing there in clothes. You've got to, so if you're breaking into it, I would try to shoot on location first. Try to create a story with the clothes and the subject. And if that calls for a blank stare, good. If it calls for a smile, good. If it calls for tears, whatever it calls for, that's what you want to bring to the image. And there you go. That's how you shoot it. Simple as that. It's hard in a podcast format to really break these things down. Perhaps on my photo channel, my photo YouTube channel, I will try to do more of this where I show an image and I talk about kind of the idea and the concept behind it. If people are interested in that, let me know. Okay, so I'm going to explain the Patreon setup now. If you are not interested at all in that, I thank you for listening this far, and hopefully you've subscribed or followed this podcast so that you can get it in your feed every week. Thanks everyone for calling in, Philip and Mark. Thank you for listening, basically. And if you want to call in, like I said, I would love to hear people's voices. You can also send an email to avoice@dnphoto. Also, please join the Discord. So all those things are great, and let's talk about Patreon. Okay, so Mark had a question about the Patreon. He said that he didn't quite understand it. I don't have it open in front of me, and maybe it's easier for me to explain it when I don't. So a lot of people reach out to me and they want me to do mentoring via Zoom or in person or workshops or send me emails and stuff like that. So I've tried to put it in a way that I can set it up so that it has a pricing structure for people and it's simple. It may be that this is not the best setup and it might change over time, but for now, the first few levels of Patreon effectively give you access to like early access to videos and some special chats and stuff. But when you get into the mentoring levels, which I think is maybe the more complicated part, you have three options. The first option is once a month, we have an email correspondence. You send me a question, something serious about business. Don't say, what lens should I buy? Because that's probably a waste of a question. Send me something. Send me an image to critique. Send me an invoice that you recently sent and ask if you any updates of how you should change it or an estimate. Maybe you didn't get a job and I can give you some information as to why I think maybe you didn't. At the next level, it's kind of the same, except it's a Zoom meeting. We get a 45-minute Zoom meeting once a month. This is really nice. I've done these before, non-Patreon type. Usually I charge anywhere from $100 to $200 an hour for these. And basically, we just talk. You can ask me whatever you want. You can have a dozen questions depending on what they are. We'll get as much done as we can in the 45 minutes. And you could just reach out to me if this is something you're interested in and you don't want to do it on a month-to-month basis. I do them solo. This is a little bit less expensive. It maybe, and also it works out to be a little better for me because I understand like how many people are interested in this to see if it's something that's worthwhile for me to stay on top of. And at the highest level, what you're getting, and this is probably something you might do for like 6 months, 8 months, maybe a year at the most, what you're getting is the same Zoom meeting, but you also get a separate channel in my Discord. This channel, if you're not familiar with Discord, is basically a private chat room. It's like opening up a private chat room with me directly, and I'll check it at least once a week, but probably more often. And you can just write to me in there, write questions, write thoughts, what's going on. You have a small question, you have a big question. There's no limit to how much you can ask. I'll answer as much as I can, obviously. And then we have our Zoom meeting. And what's nice about this level is we'll already be talking about stuff and I'll have some ideas about what we can move forward on. It's a little bit more where I might get more hands-on as far as like, instead of just asking or answering questions you're asking, I might be able to give it more direct advice because it's a regular thing. So those are the three like mentoring levels. If that makes sense, then in something you think you might want to do, or if you just want to support the Patreon on any level, the $3, the $5, whatever, you can check the link below and I would appreciate it. It's, as you probably know, a lot of work to put together all these things and I love doing them, but money has to come from somewhere. And I'd rather not take lots of advertisers on the podcast and on the YouTube and sponsored videos for products and stuff. I'd rather have the people that are supporting me be the ones that get all the answers and everything for it. So whether or not this is the right thing for the channels, we'll find out. I just recently started it. If you have any feedback, go ahead and send me an email. Like I said, avoice@dnphoto.com, and we'll talk about it. Until then, I'll talk to you soon.